thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today, Becoming an Enterprise-Based Cannabis Company. I'm Mike Fourcher, one of the co-founders of Grown In, and I have three excellent panelists that I'm going to get to in a moment. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, PayQuick. That's spelled Payqwick. PayQuick makes cannabis banking easy. Since the dawn of cannabis legalization more than 5 years ago, PayQuick has provided cannabis businesses with a full suite of bank and treasury services across the U.S., including Illinois and Michigan. Serving all types of licensees, the PayQuick platform handles over $1 billion in payments from public multi-state operators to corner dispensaries across our network. PayQuick helps your cannabis business grow with access to lending capital, investments, payroll and insurance, merchant processing, and more. And for banks and credit unions, PayQuick takes over your operations and compliance burden while giving your clients the same platform access to the PayQuick financial network. Talk to the banking and finance experts at PayQuick to help your cannabis business grow, just like thousands of other cannabis companies. So we are going to have a great discussion today for about half an hour or so, and then I'm going to try and leave another 10, 15 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. And please raise your hand, or actually please submit your question through the chat and I'll be able to see them. So first off, we have Michael Piermont, President and Chief Revenue Officer at Leaf Trade, wearing the nifty Leaf Trade merch. Leaf Trade is a technology company whose platform facilitates ordering and fulfillment in highly regulated cannabis markets. In this role, Michael oversees company strategy, sales, customer success, and marketing. Prior to joining Leaf Trade, Michael held leadership roles at Career Builder, Fuda, EcoFit, Fanchest, and Amstats, the latter two of which he co-founded and helped reach acquisition. Then we also have Gary Cohen, CEO of Cova, a leading point of sale and ERP system for cannabis companies. Gary leads Cova's charge into the legal cannabis space by guiding the vision, strategic development, go-to-market plans, and culture. Before joining Cova, Gary was a principal in over a dozen tech startups in the mobile communications industry, ranging from small VC-funded companies to Fortune 100 firms, including Onavo, which was later acquired by Facebook. And then finally, we have Alyssa Kramer, who's the manager of application implementation and training at PharmaCann. Alyssa oversees support and implementation of new locations of PharmaCann's Microsoft Dynamics NAV platform, which is used as their point of sale, as well as the cultivation, manufacturing, and finance system. Thank you all very much. I got to tell you, I'm actually really excited about this conversation. As dry as it might seem that we're talking about enterprise businesses, I personally think that this is the line between being a small business and really being ready to grow into something big. And so I'm hoping all of you have a lot of really nifty things to say. And so let's start off with just a really simple question, which I think is probably very complex, which is, what exactly does enterprise-based mean? Gary, do you want to start off with that? You
Sure.
sell an enterprise-based system. What is that?
Well, I think the definition is kind of hard to put your finger on, but the basis of enterprise versus, let's say, mom and pop, which is pretty much the term in the cannabis industry that is used. It's either a multi-location operation with 10 or more locations. It could be multi-state, or it could just be a really high presence, high volume, dollar volume operation. And that could be greater than $12 million a year or $1 million a month. And I guess where enterprise kicks in is because the scope of the operations necessitates kind of centralized operations centralized oversight and controls. And you could be a big operation and not do that, but at some point the lack of efficiency is going to kick in, or the inability to optimize your operations. So it's kind of, you get so big that you need some systems, and you need some processes that make your business operate more efficiently because of that scope.
Okay, so Michael, as somebody who offers a product that syncs in a lot with ERPs and those other types of things, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would just add that for me, when we look at the cannabis market and trying to define enterprise, it's the folks that are spending more time talking about systems, implementing systems, trying to do things as opposed to selling their product or moving their product. And so when I think of enterprise, I think of companies or organizations that can and are looking for operational leverage. So that is part of their strength, is that they do this over and over in multiple markets. So they're really good at it, and they can have one system which cuts off people or cuts off processes. And the operational leverage gives them more focus to move the product through the supply chain, but more importantly, more focus on the product, right? That's what you guys do, is you create great products, you move them, you market them, you sell them. And when you have, an enterprise outlook or operational leverage that you can attain, usually by, having a simple process that flows through all your systems, well, then, it all flows to the bottom line, right? And you spend less time moving products or less time on non-revenue based activities and more time on product innovation and revenue-based activities.
And so, Alyssa, you're in the middle of this. You're in the belly of the beast. What does all this mean to you? What is that? What is an enterprise system?
It's funny, if you Google enterprise-based, which I work in IT, so of course I did, Google will tell you that being enterprise-based means that you're able to track and control all the complex operations of your business. In the cannabis space, we are particularly equipped very well at three things: tracking and controlling and being complex. So when you kind of think about cannabis and all of these complexities, it feels like this is a very natural pairing to invest in being enterprise-based and invest in having this level of control. And of course, what we're required to do already is track and control from a regulatory perspective. And making a decision to become enterprise-based and investing the time and energy in that allows you to leverage the tracking and controlling that's already happening into the second part of Google's definition, which is to enable planning, forecasting, making good and mature and mostly informed strategic decisions. So, this is getting away from, and I think that Michael and Gary both illuminated this, it's getting away from making one-off decisions, and it's leveraging the experience of every decision you've made before to consistently improve each decision down the line.
So that you're speaking very broadly about stuff. Can you give some examples of like decision making that maybe you do differently, or the tools that you gain as a result of having this enterprise-based system?
Sure. I think I think in all areas where we're operating, right, cannabis operating with variability state by state and division that is required state by state, and separation that's required state by state. Things as simple as being able to have a single set of items where you can have a single set of items. Things as complex as being able to report with some standardization, and then being able to make decisions based on that information. So having a concise list of what you're selling allows you to say, like, this is selling really well, as opposed to saying, like, I think maybe this product is selling really well, but we call it one thing here, we call it something else in store number 2. So I'm kind of guessing because I heard some good feedback. It converts the anecdote of so-and-so really liked this product to on paper, this product sold really well, or on paper, this promotion ran really well. And those are the kind of decisions that get driven by having centralization and standardization, and can really leverage the systems that are in place to allow that.
Thank you. Alyssa, one thing, got a couple of notes from folks that your audio is kind of faint. I don't know if there's something you can do
I would just add one point that I think when folks understand, or they try to understand the goals and where they're trying to go, whether that be raising the prices or selling faster or selling more efficiently or selling the right price, the right product to the right person, I think it's really focused on how do you change behavior, right? And when you talk about enterprise, you're changing behavior across the organization, right? And so that's hard. And that's why people lean on systems where the system can essentially kind of be your babysitter and everyone falls into that. And so, you know, as we go through this, it's really behavior modification, right? It's like, how do we get the whole enterprise, the whole company to do the same thing in different states, even though there might be, you know, the last 5% might be different. Like she said, there might be, you know, a different product SKU or something, but how is generally 90, 95% the same? And how do you create that behavior in an enterprise organization?
Gary, tell me, you know, your thoughts on what are some of the tools that somebody gains by becoming enterprise-based?
Well, I couldn't agree with the other guys more. I think that it's not that you just gain tools, though. Not all of a sudden you're some giant company and the tools just show up. But what you do have is data. You have a lot of data, and it's coming from a lot of different points of the company. And I think that next level of operating as an enterprise is actually doing something with that data. And it's that data that gets normalized. And as Michael said, not just normal, well, Alyssa said normalize it, and then Michael said apply it. And you're applying the insights or the information you're getting across the organization. So that consistency builds, it builds a lot of things. It, you know, we aim at the same star, so we can align on what our goals are because we're speaking the same language. We're looking at the same information to make decisions off of. I think the other thing is it, in a way, democratizes the organization. So somebody's not siloed with why, you know, why is Gary's group doing so well? Well, they have information no one else has, and that no one else has figured out how to use it. You're spreading it across the organization. Again, all these things lead to better decisions. You're making better decisions. And that's that next level up that you gain. So the tools could be systems. They could be, you know, like here in Colorado, where you can be vertically integrated. You have people who are growing, manufacturing, and retailing. But because they're sharing systems and the basis of communication is across the whole organization, they gain efficiency over people who aren't sharing all that information.
So Gary and Alyssa, I want to ask each of you, can you give an example of a decision that somebody makes differently in cannabis? Or Michael, anybody, I mean,
Yeah, I could tell.
No, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead. You start first.
I was going to say, we see this all the time. So in most of the markets that Leaf Trade serves, they're highly regulated, and the demand far, you know, outweighs the supply. And so when folks work in that market, they're like, why would I need an enterprise sales and fulfillment platform if I sell out every Friday, right? And so that there's no, you know, why do I need that? I send, you know, a spreadsheet out, people fill it out, and I sell. The problem is, you're building a really bad culture in we're going to let the customer dictate another customer sale, and instead of figuring out, again, what is the behavior, or what do I need to do to increase, you know, my throughput or revenue, right? And so I think a lot of times people think because a result isn't bad, that they don't need to fix that process. Let's fix, you know, how we do the manifest, because that's taking a long time, right? And so there's efficiency processes, there's revenue processes, but they're really the same thing, right? Because there should be one process. And so I think a lot of times people really underestimate when things are going well. A lot of times those are kind of what is the Band-Aid. Things are going well, so no one looks at them. Like, things are fine, like I'm selling out on Friday, right? But typically that's where the trouble comes, because, you know, whatever rock is unturned and, you know, the market changes and the dynamics, and then you're left without a process, right? And so I look at, you know, kind of in two fashions, is like, what's going wrong that you need to fix, and what's going right that needs to have a process behind it so that you can scale. And I use this analogy a lot, but it's, you know, when you're baking, right, you can like bake cookies and they're okay, right? But if you don't follow a process and a recipe, it's going to be really hard to bake a lot of them. I know that because I tried this weekend. And it's also going to be really hard to, you know, continue this recipe, and you're going to have stuff everywhere. And right. And so just because you baked them once and because they were pretty good doesn't mean you know how to open a cookie shop or even sell them out of your garage or anything like that. And so that's where we see a lot of, you know, we're only doing 30 orders, right? And like, we got this little method and we allocate some inventory to certain people, and it's going well, right? And so it's trying to, you know, understand, well, where are the scaling points going to hit? Where are you going to have to hire people? What's your company going to look like at 100 orders, 300 orders, 500 orders? And if you can kind of see that, you know, forward-looking process or what you're going to need, then you're ahead of the game. And then you're just, you know, you're scaling up, and that's the exciting thing.
Alyssa, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think Michael illuminated it very well. And please tell me if I'm still too faint. I'm going to lean really close. But I think that for us, an example of decisions that we've made have been as specific as, you know, what are we actually, how much does it actually cost us? And are we going to continue to produce products based on the cost? Because we have the ability to, as Gary said, track this from the very beginning, from cultivation all the way to sales. And we can look back at that and go like, whoa, hold on, we're spending, you know, this is going to cost us how much to retail for what number? And that gives you the opportunity to say, this is entirely internal, right? Like, we need to figure out either lowering costs here, raising prices here, finding new materials, finding new opportunities, different products. And so I think it can be as specific as that. And I will say that that is a thing that has come up, a decision that has been made here using data that lives in our system. And it can also be as broad as, do we use the process that, let's say, Cultivation Center A is using, which might, you know, might involve a different layout or a different method to treat the plants or a different setup, or the one that Cultivation Center B is using. And again, because you've got all the data in a golden source of truth, like, you know where your data lives and it's standardized and it's consistent, you can compare those two sets of data and go, we want to move in the direction of either A or B. And it is not Cultivation Center A has nicer people and their plants are greener. Like, that might be a consideration, right? But there are concrete levels that can be compared and contrasted and can be done against an expectable value. You know, what the company has decided, what leadership has decided, can be used to assess against specific values.
Yeah, just to add to that, you bring up a really good point. Having a really good process and being enterprise gives you the ability to look at things differently. Another analogy is selling cars, right? The same car dealership might sell cars differently. They might sell used cars, leased cars, new cars, right? The process up until the point of actually purchasing, it's basically the same, right? You meet with some guy, he shows you the car, you get the free coffee, the donut, you take the drive, then you get to the point where, what do I have to do to put you in the car? And then the paperwork or the end of it is a little different if you lease versus buy versus, you know, pre-own. but all the way up to that part, all the way how they market, everything, you know, is the same, right? And then they look at lease tactics versus new car, old car, and, you know, then you get to service and that's different and all that. And they may change that process. You know, Chevy might do something different in this location and that location, but they have the same process, right? And it's easy to identify, you know, where they need to add things, you know, for different cohorts. So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah, if I could, let me just give a real easy example. And this goes to the difference between enterprise, non-enterprise. In a non-enterprise situation, almost all of your information is backward looking. In an enterprise, it's real time and forward looking. So for example, if you look at your sales data, you look at it in volume and time, then if you analyze, well, based on what's happened, how do I staff going forward? So I could sit down, do it on a spreadsheet, or I could have a solution that is basically looking at how do I resource and staff and schedule going forward. And that's where that one aspect of labor management would be in an enterprise resource solution.
So these are good examples and good things to think about. The thing I want to ask you guys is, all right, so let's say I've got my business and I'm running it with spreadsheets and QuickBooks, and I want to become an enterprise-based company. You know, what are the steps that I need to take? What do I have to do in order to actually make this happen? I mean, I can go buy software, but what else do I have to do in order to make that work?
I like kind of the happy, medium, and realistic path. So forget about systems, right? If everything works out and we wake up and nothing wrong happens, what is the ideal process, right? And then you start looking at what systems help me get there, right? That's kind of the medium path. And then you look at, okay, you know, systems take time to implement, to learn, you know, what is kind of the step, and again, you know, what is the behavior that the organization needs to work to kind of achieve that enterprise? And usually it's allowing people to be specialists, right? It's kind of the old notion is, you know, if you do a lot of a little, you know, a lot of the little things ends up being a lot of nothing, right? So if everyone's doing like a bunch of little stuff, the organization doesn't find people, or doesn't create a culture of people being amazing and experts, right? So first, what I would do is look at who's doing what and why, right? Why is this person doing it? Are they doing it because it just kind of, they've been doing it since they got there and they do this, you know, TPS report and like that's a thing and it takes, you know, or is there actual reasons? And if you start, you know, we literally do this all the time at Leaf Trade. We've got 4 or 5 columns and it's like, you know, I'm either doing something to get a customer, to service a customer, or make the product better. And if you're not doing something in those 3 buckets, well, why, right? And so you know, kind of trimming the fat and keeping everyone focused. And you know, be surprised how when people only are really focused on 3 or 4 things, you know, how much more efficient they are. And then once that happens, they become experts in their part of the supply chain or their part in the organization. And then it's much easier to implement software or different tactics.
Alyssa, you're the person who's supposed to implement this. So that actually is in your title.
It is in my title.
I mean, it wasn't like you showed up and everything was ready to go, right? So
No, it's not.
What do you do? How does it work?
I love the idea of taking a path that's a happy medium and in a middle road. And I think that in a lot of ways that's really hard to do. I think that the decision and the energy behind becoming an enterprise-based organization, it kind of depends on your scale, right? In a lot of ways, becoming enterprise is something, and I think Gary nailed, like 100% nailed it. I actually had this written down, like, not enterprise is very reactionary, you're responding to everything after it happens. And becoming enterprised is more on the, once you have become enterprise, you're thinking ahead. And from where I've been, from my experience, the most powerful tool that you can have in that pursuit is having a full commitment from your leadership, like absolutely top, tip top down commitment to the importance of data collection, the importance of the integrity of the data that you are collecting, and the importance of a sustainable business process that allows for that. And it is, in a lot of ways, it's accepting that you are going to do a step, and that step might not be, you know, watering the plants, or it might not be selling the product, or it might not be posting something on Leaf Trade for somebody else to buy it. That step might be indicating another pertinent detail about the step you're about to take, and then using a system or using a process that collects that, such that the next time you have to make that decision, you have, as Gary and Michael have indicated, you have something to go back to. And to Gary's point, like if we're keeping track of, you know, if you have a system that keeps track of this, that allows you to see all of your sales data per hour, per day, you can start to make staffing decisions. You can start to make promotional decisions. When are we really popular? When are we really not popular? Can we do something to bring up like your 3 to 5 p.m.? Because 5 to 7 is really, you know, has a high attendance rate, right? Or a high sales volume. But you need the decision from the very top of the organization that this is something we're willing to absorb, right? The end is going to justify the means. And if you don't have that, you can buy all the software you want, and then you will have no data in it. It will just be sitting there, right? You'll have a lot of blank fields. And then in a year, people will complain about the blank fields because they're interrupting the one field they need to key in to tell you where their plant is, or, you know, to put in their cost of their item. And as soon as you have that, you can start to identify either what type of software you need, what type of actual, you know, application or tool you need, or you can start to look at what you already have and identify where is it powerful, where is it lacking, you know, what can I do with this, what can I make of this? And so that's a lot of what my role and my team does here. And by no means, like, I'm not the only person doing this. And that, I think, is the other part to realize, is that you need a team of people. And that team of people needs to be not just technical resources. You don't just throw an application manager at the enterprise thinking. You have to have people that have this mindset across your organization. You need somebody who's a genius in procurement, a genius in data, a genius in retail. And when you can leverage all of those thinkers and give them a tool to put all of this data, all this thinking into, you can just absolutely skyrocket. Yeah, so tools are fun. I would love to be like, you just need, you know, a specific tool that Gary Lovely has presented for us, right? That can talk to us about. But I think there's so much more than that, because otherwise you just have, essentially, you've got numbers on a screen or fields on a screen, which is even worse.
And I want to ask Gary to respond to this in a minute, but first, if anyone has any questions, I know I said raise your hand, but actually it would be great if you can put it into the Q&A that's at the bottom of your screen. Just hit that and then type in your question. And I think also people can upvote questions that they like too, which is a neat feature. So Gary, do you have any thoughts? I mean, you've had customers that have gone from being little small fry to larger ones. You know, what is sort of the progression that you see, and what are the ones that fail and succeed? You know, what are there?
Well, there in this industry, there's not a lot of failures. So, you know, usually if you've got your act together enough to sustain the first year, unless you're like Oklahoma, where, you know, there's more stores than there are cows, you know, that's a hard market. But, you know, up in Canada, we've got about 80% of the enterprise business up there. And we've seen them grow from a few stores to our biggest client has 90 stores. And if I knew this question was coming, so I thought about who they are, what they've done. And I think Michael and Alyssa I'm not going to repeat what they said. I think I'll just give you my bullets of the formula, which they expanded upon. First, you recognize that whole kind of oversight and control, we've gotten to a scope or a scale that necessitates thinking about our business at another level, thinking about how do we communicate and how are we going to be a better company. And you pretty much see that the right hand and the left hand they're not working together. They're not on the same page. And like I said, it could be multi-state, it could be multi-location within a city, but we're not in sync. I think the third thing is accountability. So how do you hold people accountable? And if your culture doesn't do that, systems and software aren't going to do, they don't solve it. It's a cultural, who are we? What are we about? And if we buy into, everybody's got to be pretty much accountable for what they're responsible in contributing. And the way that you do, the way that accountability works is you have some measurement. And that measurement is metrics. And where do you get those metrics from? From some system. So that's, the question was, what steps do you take? Well, it's at a high level culturally. It's the direction we want to take. It's recognition that if we want to get bigger and we want to do a better job of growing and managing this company, we need to understand what we expect of everyone. So and then that leads to, it could be salesforce.com, it could be Sage or Microsoft Dynamics, it could be ERP system. All those things all are used to accomplish this end.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to some questions here. And Alyssa, there's actually been a couple of people who have asked, what training beyond higher ed have you completed to help you on your path to what you do today? And what skills did you acquire that help you build value for PharmaCann?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see, let's start with the easier part of it. What skills have I acquired? A lot of patience. A lot of patience. And I say that a little bit with a laugh, right? But a lot of what I've done and a lot of what I've done here has been via trial and error, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. I've done very little, I'll be honest, in a formal skill set enhancing thing. There's not really a lot of that. I've taken some, courses from one of our vendors that that reviews the use of the system. I've gone through trainings for all the state traceability and tracking systems, which usually eliminate things that are missing. I'll be honest, those are great trainings to attend. If you have them offered, take them and think about what that system does not give you that you want, because it will blow your mind when you start thinking about it with the lens of like, okay, what about, how do I get this out of? And you're like, oh my God, this is going nowhere. They help hugely. And yeah, I was very fortunate. I came into PharmaCann as an IT project manager. And really for me, I think the skills that I learned there, skills being varying degrees, hardware, software, installations, networking, like infrastructure, got a little tidbit of each of those, which helped me put the whole picture of what we need as an organization together. And I was able to use that to move into my role here. It's been an interesting journey. I'm very grateful. PharmaCann is a really cool place to work for. I'm really open to a lot of that sort of thinking of learning and growing as you go and not necessarily having checked a box, off to the left before you started.
Cool. So I have a question for Gary and Michael. How would you describe the level of software and technology maturity in the cannabis industry? What's holding operators back from adopting modern software solutions? Oh boy, Michael's ready for that one. I can see.
Yeah, so I'll take it. I think the issue right now is there's a lot of software companies that go out to develop one system or try to fix one or two problems. And they hear a client say, it'd be really nice if you could do this too, or this. And it's not in their scope. And all of a sudden they're getting wider and their product works a little bit quirky this way. And maybe they're doing some stuff. And all of a sudden you've just stretched out the product. It's not great. It's not efficient. You've now distracted the team, or the team is now working on a bunch of other stuff. So I think, you know, the best companies in and out of cannabis on the technology side are the ones that are great at what they do. And then they build momentum and they do other stuff. You know, for example, Leaf Trade, we were really focused early on in fixing the ordering problem and the supply and the demand and how to order and efficiencies. We didn't run into payment or data or anything like that. We just made sure that we could handle the transaction on both sides and that everyone was comfortable with that and it could work in all scenarios in all markets. And once we nailed that, and it took a while, then you kind of start moving over. So to put a bow on it, I think there's a lot of folks who, you know, forget how hard it is to be great at one area of the ecosystem. And there's just kind of a lot of thin tech companies where it's like, oh yeah, we do that, and we do this, and we do that. It's like pretty hard to do everything when you've been around for a year, right? So something's not great. And you should only use software that's great, you know, because that's where you'll just, you know, chase your tail and create more problems than you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. You know, we only do retail software, so we're point of sale. Turns out point of sale is your source of truth, you know, for the operations of a dispensary. And we spun out of a 20-year-old point of sale software company in the cellular industry. And the reason we went into this was because they're both incredibly complex. And that company has about 85% share of all the cellular stores in North America. So they solved the simplifying complexity. So what Michael was saying is about what do you do, you know, look for companies that do something really well. And I'm not a believer that vertically integrated software is necessarily good at it is great at any one thing. So that's a big piece of our industry. I think the other thing about the cannabis industry in particular, we have over 65 competitors in point of sale software. And I would say that the back end of that tail, you know, let's say the last 45 of those are two dudes in a garage. So one guy worked at a dispensary, one guy knew how to code, and they go, this software sucks, we can do it better. And they built their thing and they sold it to dispensaries in the Boston area, you know, so they've got 5 clients or 10 clients or stores. And that doesn't scale. And, it, you know, as the industry evolves, and the one thing we haven't talked about, and it affects all 3 of us, is that from a regulatory perspective, this is a never ending set of changes. Mm-hmm. So you're constantly adapting within a market, much less if you operate in multiple markets, you've got to keep modifying this solution. And that complexity is this industry. And I think the level of precision needed in this industry is incredibly high because a license is on the line. So for all of us, any other industry, if your solution or your software kind of is okay, well, okay can cost you your license in this industry. Okay, you know, there's no margin of error that's acceptable to a state. And it's because we're all, you know, the operators, us, we're all trying to, or not trying, we have to do it perfectly to legitimize and allow this industry to exist. So we have a a higher bar, a higher set of expectations than any other industry I know of. And in your evaluation of, am I going to go to enterprise and I'm going to get the tools needed to do that? That's another consideration. If it's, you know, some Oracle offshoot or SAP offshoot that's not built for cannabis, you're just going to add more challenge, money, complexity, development work to be in compliance. So again, I always come back to, you know, pick a cannabis solution, something that's built for this industry, because if it's not, you've got to adapt it, and that's expensive, and it has risk. If you don't do it right, you're in violation. There's your license.
So one question is, they ask about, you know, social equity participants, but I think this applies to anybody that has a new company. You know, if you're just entering the industry, how do you start from the beginning to think along these lines of making yourself into an enterprise company? You're just getting started and you want to become one. You know, what things should you be starting with?
Well, I'll do a quick answer. If you're a one-store social equity or company, it's not really an enterprise conversation. I think what you need is the solutions to be a good retailer or cultivator or manufacturer. And the costs, so we haven't even talked about the costs of these things that are enterprise capable go up. You're getting the heavy duty model of whatever it is, whether it's POS or grow management solutions. As you go up to that enterprise, you're adding costs, and you're not necessarily going to get an ROI off of that for the scope of your business. So we deal with a lot of both like California, Los Angeles. We're getting ready for Detroit. Illinois is trying to figure out their thing right now with social equity. And my best advice is look for solutions that that will, I guess if there's an added value, it's the fact that you don't have familiarity with the cannabis industry. And look for providers that will provide training, education, specifically for what you're about to do. So don't go with anyone who's ordered online, they deliver it to you, watch the videos, figure it out yourself. You're just going to be behind. It's going to be harder to do. Look for that value add to help you get off the ground.
I think Alyssa said it great. When you're in such a new industry and you're in a new company, exploring and kind of learning the processes and trying things, that's really important too. So to Gary's point, you know, I look at some of our clients in Illinois, like a GTI, you know, when we started working with them, they had one license here or two licenses. You know, they were not enterprise. They had plans to be enterprise, and they did things differently and they tried new things. So the process of learning, or kind of even the process of deciding what process, or just going through that and trying new things and testing stuff, that's really important, because what you think you need now is going to be much more different. You know, it's going to be much different than, you know, what you think you need in 8 months and 14 months and 15 months. It should evolve, but the important thing is to think about this early on and constantly. And I have a sticky note right in my computer. It's like, how can I make this easier, right? Like being enterprise focused and data driven sometimes is kind of like being lazy. Like, I don't want to come up with all the answers. I just want to look at my dashboard and tell me like what's working and what's not, right? And it's easier that way. And so I think being a data focused organization from day one, and it does, like it could be a small set of data, but just know that we're going to make big decisions off data, and we're going to test things, and then we're going to try things. And I think those are kind of like the first few steps. And when you start doing those, whether it's a new POS system, whether it's new packaging, new delivery people, new software, and you have that kind of culture and mindset built in, you have built trust within the organization. And so when you're working on a new platform or you're implementing something, people are excited about it. They're not like, oh, another thing. Because as you know, Gary and Alyssa mentioned, a system is a system. Like, we've all been forced to use systems and we do the bare minimum. It's not good for either side. So I think really just trust the process and be committed to making decisions on data would be my, that would be my advice.
And Alyssa, can you wrap it up?
Yeah, I would add one thing, which is that, this comes directly from some recent experiences that I've had here. We're fortunate enough to have some licenses in Pennsylvania where we have to use a different system. And it's great, right? We're all established, we know what we've got going on, and we go into Pennsylvania and everything is from the ground up again. And one of the things that we found from that experience was we assumed, okay, we're opening one location in Pennsylvania. They can handle creating their item master. They can handle creating a standard for naming. They can handle all of this stuff because it's one location. And then location 2 came on. We were busy. We said, okay, location 2 can get it. They'll get the advice from location 1. They're fine. We're good. And now we have 2 locations operating, and I'm getting calls from our absolute genius members of the team who I referred to before, who are trying to track sales. They're trying to track procurement. They're trying to figure out what we need to buy, what's selling well. They're trying to pull reports, and they're going, we have 2 different sets of items. How can we do this? How can we standardize this across these 2 different stores? And this is a very small example, right? It's item creation. We're going to revise our entire sets of items. We're going to find commonality. We're going to rename everything. We're going to renumber everything. We're going to create new where we have to. So for anybody that's starting up, learn from my mistake, please. Never assume that you're going to do one thing one time. Everything that you do here is going to iterate, whether it is because a vendor changes their name or their brand, or there's a new state tracking system introduced. Hi, Massachusetts, I see you. Just like one day, hey, you guys have to use metric now. Okay, I guess. So now we got to learn what we've learned about metric from other states and apply it over here. The whole industry, it's learning from each other. So when you start that initial, anything you do once, identify how that can scale, identify what this means for the next time you do it. And so if that means you have one store, don't let anybody make a decision in a vacuum. Have the conversations about, what does this data mean? What does this item name mean? What does it mean if we allow, our vendors to decide what they're sending us? What does it mean if we use a Google Sheet instead of a fully robust system? And maybe that doesn't mean anything. Maybe it just means that your data going on that Google Sheet has to be really, really good. Or maybe it means that in the future, we're going to be operating off of a Google Sheet, and the guy next to us that we're competing against is going to have a robust planning software, right? Like, just be constantly looking down the road. And even if that's not your 3-month plan, I guess in another industry, this would be like a 5-year plan, but it's cannabis. So if that's not your 3-month plan, don't eliminate it. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by not trying to plan ahead for that.
So we've come up on our 45 minutes, and I promised you that we'd keep it to 45 minutes. And I have a waffle pattern of light on my face, which means that it's been some time. And so before we go, I'd just like to ask, what is a good way for folks to reach out to you if they want to connect with you? Gary, can you tell folks how to reach you?
Yeah, you could probably the easiest thing is just send me an email and I'll get right back to you and connect up. And it's gary@covasoftware.com.
Cool. And Michael?
Yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I don't have a MySpace account, but or email. So michael@leaftrade.com. But if you message me on any of those platforms, I'll probably get back to you.
Okay. And Alyssa?
Probably LinkedIn. I look very different in my LinkedIn picture. Don't be scared. It's me. I'm very blonde. I had a moment and I went the other direction. Yeah, I think LinkedIn's probably the best. I tend to get bombarded with other work emails and I don't want to miss you guys. So LinkedIn will keep you separate. And we'd love to talk to anybody about anything.
Pandemic is the best time ever to experiment with hairstyles.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, just once again, I want to thank our sponsor, PayQuick. PayQuick makes cannabis banking easy, deposit cash, checks, wires, ACH, and pay vendors easily using the PayQuick platform. Multi-state operators, cultivators, manufacturers, and dispensaries love the simplicity of PayQuick Treasury Solutions. And if your bank doesn't speak cannabis like the experts at PayQuick, tell them to convert their cannabis solution to PayQuick. PayQuick helps your cannabis business grow. Visit payquick.com. PAYQWICK to meet your cannabis banking experts. Thank you, Gary, Michael, and Alyssa. This was a really great conversation. You're all very smart people, and it's really fun to talk to you. So thank you, and have a great day.